Everyone, this is me, Donna. I'm making this video in response to people making comments online and, in my other videos and stuff about how they don't think that the CRI Genetics is giving them an accurate report due to the fact that they're seeing that so many people have similar stuff to them and all that. But what they're not understanding is there's been a lot of migrations, a lot of traveling, a lot of slave trades, all kinds of things, and a lot of reasons as to why so many of us out there, millions of us, have similar DNA. Or similar ethnic groups, okay? We've got all kinds of admixtures out there. Although there are some people who are 100% British, different forms of Great Britain, Irish, whatever, or African or whatever, but a lot of us out there have all kinds of mixes of a little bit of everything, okay? So that reason alone does not make this test inaccurate. And just because ancestry.com or 23andMe or MyHeritage or whatever says certain things, and this gives you much more and it kind of changes the picture up for you, that does not make this test false and those tests correct. Okay, because for starters, those big major companies like that, they only take and accept the larger pieces of DNA when they do their calculations. So if you're if you have a little piece of DNA that is smaller than, say, 6, 7, or 8 centimorgans, depending on what they use, it won't be included in your calculations, okay? And what's crazy is there's people out there that it tells them, okay, you have 1% African. In reality, they may actually have 10% African or 20% or whatever, but because it was the smallest section of DNA that they have for that person, they only calculated it as being 1%. So like if they have, say, like if that's the smallest piece of the strips that they're working with, even though it might be 50 centimorgans long or bigger, but because they have these other longer pieces that make up for being, say, Irish or British or whatever, and when they get through with their calculations, the smaller sections end up being the African, then therefore that it's going to get a smaller number, and the other stuff is going to get the larger number. Even though this person may have actually small pieces of Italian, small pieces of other stuff that make up, when they all add together, might actually make up for 30% of this person's DNA, but because these pieces were individually so small to them and fell below their limit, their threshold, they didn't even include them. You could have a piece as large as 6 centimorgans or whatever, or 5.9 or whatever, but because they only allow a certain size, they're not even going to include it. So all that other stuff gets knocked out of the picture, and since they're only including all that other, then that's the picture that they give you, which is false, in my opinion, okay? So that's how I look at that. The good thing about this company is it initially will give you what it calls the recent analysis, which is the bigger picture, which deals with those large strips of DNA that they're including to account for your recent ancestors, okay? So that's how that picture looks. So that may go back to maybe your 3rd or 4th great-grandparent, depending on your situation, okay? So that's as far back as the recent part goes, okay? And for me, this is how that picture looks, okay? This is what I am on the surface, okay? But when they do the advanced analysis, where they include all the tiny stuff, whatever their tiny threshold is, This is the bigger picture of me and what I actually carry around inside of me, okay? So this is how this looks, okay? The only thing that I found disappointing was that they didn't separate my African out and include it, because it does show up. Let me find it. Where is that at? Right here in my 23andMe. They actually included it. But the interesting thing is, and I've been doing, some more reading and all that, is that people from countries like Puerto Rico and, some of your South American countries and stuff, during all the period of where they were conquered by the Spanish, and then here come the Europeans and all that, there was a big slave trade that was incorporated into all this, okay? So not only in America, but also in Central and South America, okay? So a lot of African slaves were mixed in with the natives on those islands and those, just the different countries, okay, within those regions. And so it created an interesting admixture, so that then later on, when different things happened, some of those Native American / African mixes were then taken up north in America, and also in the southern states, and sold as slaves, okay? And it didn't matter because they didn't deal with all this DNA stuff, and they didn't care. But because those people were dark-skinned, it didn't matter to them if they were mostly Native American and had a little bit of African, or the other way around. They were dark-skinned, and therefore they were labeled one thing or the other. And mostly, especially with dealing with the whole slave thing, they were probably labeled African, okay? So, for all I know, my ancestors could have been within this mix, because it does kind of make sense in the fact that it's because, as you can see, I do have Puerto Rican and Mexican and Peruvian and Colombian and all that in my admixture of my Native American, and I am showing up as having Tiano, or however you pronounce it, Native American. I'm kin to people from that Native American group and all that. It does make sense to me to think that maybe possibly I've got that mixed in with some African, and some companies can differentiate. Some companies can define that as African, and others can just some companies define that as African, and other companies just go ahead and just say, okay, it's Puerto Rican or whatever, and just leave it at that, or Peruvian or whatever. They don't bother to take out the actual African, because you match certain people from that region who have the same alleles as you do, and they just go ahead and say, well, because those people are from Puerto Rico or Peru or whatever, they just go ahead. This company probably just labels you as whatever it is that you match from that region, if that makes any sense. Okay. All right, moving on. Okay, so then this company also has a timeline. Okay. Let me go to it. All right. On this timeline, they have to be at least 80% sure that you have that ancestor before they will put them on the timeline. Although, personally, I would like it if they would include people that they're 50% sure of. But, I'll take whatever I can get. But so even if they're 79% sure of your ancestor, they're not going to include it in this timeline at this time. Now, maybe that will change in the future. I don't know. But that's how they've got it going right now. Okay. So, as I have pointed out in the past, they are 99% sure that I have Gujarati Indian. And there's other ancestors, all kinds of European and all that, where they're at least 80% or more sure that I have, okay? And let me go on down here, because also it's showing that I have Japanese. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, it's on back here, right here. Okay. And I think that may be what some companies are labeling as Ocean for me, because as I will show you, companies like Helix are labeling me as having Ocean, which is Melanesian or Polynesian or whatever. It's those islands not too far from Hawaii and Australia and all that stuff. There's people that, of course, that are native to those areas, but some of those people actually have Japanese in them. So there's a connection between Japan and these islands and stuff. Who knows exactly how the migrations went as far as that goes, but all I know is from what I read, they're that they have found a connection between Japan and these islands and stuff. And there's even been wars and stuff like that, like World War I and all that. And from what I understand, there's been all kinds of migrations and pulling people from one island to the other, slave trade, whatever. So who knows? But all I know is I've got it, and it came from somewhere. So that's why I think that even though it might be classified as Japanese, and it probably originally was Japanese, other companies are labeling it as Oceania, okay, or Polynesian, okay. And then also what's cool about this company is the fact, as I have mentioned in my previous videos, is that they claim to go back 50 generations, but for me, it actually went back 76 generations. And there's probably a lot of people out there that it went back that far, or maybe even further, which is totally cool. It's awesome. But what fascinates me is the fact that I'm walking around with this ancient Chinese day DNA that came from an ancestor from that long ago. To think that that survived, that it got passed down all the way from that human being down to me, that I got a piece of it. And to me, that just, it's so fascinating to think, even, let me go up here to this ancestor, this Northern European ancestor from 67 generations back. To think that that person lived that long ago and I've got a piece of them. For all I know, this person could be a Viking or whatever. I mean, it's mind blowing to think that, you're walking around with these ancient people in you, that they're just as much a part of you as these bigger pieces of DNA. It's just, wow. I mean, to me, it's just mind blowing. Even Spanish, 15 generations ago, I have a Spanish ancestor, and wow, the whole thing is mind blowing. But anyway, not to get too caught up in that, but the point I'm trying to make is, I don't believe this company is just pulling this stuff out of the rear end just because right now they're not giving people access to their raw DNA. It could change in the future. You don't never know. But I don't think they're making this stuff up because, for instance, a lot of this stuff is matching up, even to my helix. Let me go back to my helix. It's showing me as having Punjabi, okay, as well as Persian and Jewish and Sardinian and all that bunch of stuff, okay. It found things that it labeled as that, okay, even though the classifications may be a little bit different here and there, but the fact that they're picking up on people from those regions, whether they're labeled as Gujarati, whether they're labeled as Punjabi, as whatever. And I do definitely have Gujarati and Punjabi, and I've even found an ancestor that I in my family tree, thanks to CRI Genetics and their timeline, it helped me, and I actually found an ancestor. So I know they're definitely not pulling it out of their rear end, okay? And the cool thing is they're actually showing on their timeline where they found your piece of DNA. They're telling you where they found it on your chromosome. So let's go back right here to, let me find it right here, Gujarati Indian. And when I look back at my CRI Genetics information, okay, let me look back at this. Let me go back to the timeline if I can find it. Okay, it's telling me that on my third chromosome, they found my Gujarati Indian, okay, which is South Asian. It's labeled as South Asian. Okay, so when I look at my admixture, my K13 model, and I looked on my third chromosome, what does it say? South Asian. So it's lining up. It may not be exactly like the actual chromosome number, may not exactly match up like on my chromosome painting or whatever, but at least I know that it is on the third chromosome. Okay, so I do have South Asian on my third chromosome. Okay, so it is there. Okay, and even when I go into my ancient, like even on GEDmatch, they have what is called the ancient thing that you can look into, because they've got different models. Okay, and this just happens to be their K12 punt DNA L ancient thing. Okay, what does it say? See this right here? South Asian. Okay, look on my third chromosome. What does it say? South Asian. You can see the brown right there. South Asian. Okay, and it actually falls within the 81 million range right in here, and I believe that's where they found it on my CRI Genetics. Okay, they're saying that it's on my 84th millionth area of my chromosome. Okay, so that would actually fall within that range. See, right here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's an 81 million right here, with between 81 and, let's see, where's it at? Oh, goodness, these are all jumbled up. But anyway, within this region right in here, as you can see, there it is, okay? So, you know, there's proof right there with that, okay? Let me see if anything else. Let me go to my Japanese, for instance. Let me find it again. Okay. And I apologize if I'm getting a little bit boring, but I just want to prove my point here, okay? So they're saying that it's on my chromosome 2. As far as this goes, my Polynesian, or my Japanese, which can be labeled as Polynesian, okay? Let's see what this says about that. What does this say? Ocean, okay, which can be considered Polynesian and also Japanese. What does it say right here in my chromosome painting? What does that little purple stuff right there? That's the Ocean, okay? That it can be called Japanese or Ocean. Okay, so again, I just want to make that point that I really don't think this company is lying, because too much is lining up with all of this stuff. And like all of this South Asian that I've got, okay, it's showing up, okay? So yeah, and my Native American, I mean, all that is showing up. Let's see, where is this? See, like American Indian right here. It's showing up in here. It's on my 8th chromosome as far as GEDmatch is concerned right there, as well as on my 14th, my 17th, and all that. So yeah, I've got all kinds of mixes of stuff. And you know, even though it's not showing up in this company's timeline, it does show up in the advanced analysis that they have, as I have mentioned before. So I honestly think this company has done about the best job out of all the DNA companies that I've used as far as telling me what is there. So, you know, people can believe it or not, but when things line up, when you've got 2 or 3 different companies telling you basically the same or similar things, in my opinion, I think that it's true, and I think that it lines up. So, you naysayers out there, you can say whatever you want to, but I tend to believe the company. So that's my proof that I'm bringing to the table. But everyone can believe what they want to believe. That's your right. But I just wanted to show you my own findings and my own thoughts on this. But anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.